Hey guys, welcome back. Today, got a good lecture for you on exercise selection and how to master the art of choosing your exercises in your own program. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so there's a few things that I need to say to you guys to clear the air before we jump into the lecture. I hope to accomplish this goal today, if nothing else. I want to give you the confidence, the encouragement, the skills, and the knowledge to stop a seriously bad habit and trend that I see here on YouTube Fitness. What exactly is that trend or those habits? It's a couple things. Referring to EMG study data as if it is some kind of authority on exercise selection. I'm telling you, what exercise is going to be the most hypertrophic based on this or that. And, sometimes there's obvious examples of when EMG studies, show a massive difference between two exercises, let's say for biasing the quads or the chest or the rear delts. But then there's a lot of nuance to it where if you don't look at it objectively in the right perspective and looking at the study honestly, you're going to get lost in the sauce, especially if you're listening to a second or third hand account of it from some influencer on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is, telling you about this EMG data study. So I want you to feel the freedom to be away from the authority of the EMG data, right? It's a useful tool in exercise selection and programming, but it is by no means absolute in telling us what we need to know about what exercises are the most practical, most enjoyable, most safe for our bodies, or even at the end of the day, most hypertrophic for the exercise, for the muscle groups that we want them to be. Another one would just be simply referring to people, or deferring to people rather, who have credentials and formal education or a million subscribers on YouTube, and treating these people as if they somehow are like the gods of exercise selection and programming and strength and hypertrophy. Look, just because someone has a lot of subscribers, or they went to university, or they have a few certifications with regards to strength coaching or personal training, doesn't mean they're going to give you the best, most sage, wise advice when it comes to choosing exercises for you, who is an individual, and you're only one little tiny fraction of their audience. So they have to make generalized information at the end of the day, just like I do. But by no means should you treat any of us here on YouTube as if we are some kind of authority. At the end of the day, we're talking about picking things up and putting them down. All right, so those are the habits and trends that I want to help you break. Stop deferring to people as if they have some kind of authority just because they're successful. And don't worship EMG studies. They're not that great. They don't tell us everything we need to know. Okay, so if we're going to master the art of exercise selection, we need to separate what the needs are in exercise selection or in an exercise program in general from some of the nuance, the bonuses, the things that take a little bit more critical thinking to get right. Now, there's a few essentials that you need really in any exercise program, and irrespective of the exercise variations that you choose, there's a few things that you need to get right. You need movements, right? There are 6 fundamental movement patterns that the human body can perform, and in addition to that, there's many ways that you can isolate muscles throughout the body. So we have these compound and isolation movements. You need to do them in order to get the fruits of that productive labor, okay? You need to do the movements to get the benefit. You need consistency. So if you don't train these on a weekly basis for several months, you have no business saying it doesn't work. And you need to accumulate some tonnage. What is tonnage? Tonnage, you guys heard me talk about this many times now. It's reps times set times weight. It is really just a simple and reliable way that we can say, this is how much physical work I did on this particular session, and 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you can look at your tonnages and say, wow, those improved very significantly, and I feel good, I'm able to recover from it. It's a similar number of sets, perhaps, but the reps and the weight have gone up. That's great. That's your sign of progress. That's your proof that you're getting stronger and bigger. Yes, you can measure your arms, but tonnage is a surefire way to tell yourself that you are actually improving, irrespective of your exercise selection. So if you're not writing down your workout And if you're not pushing progressive overload in some capacity, whether it's through means of volume or reps, shaving off reps in reserve, hitting rep PRs, rep goal system, whatever it is, you need this to go up over time, regardless of what exercise you choose. Now, one of the things that I like to stress the most with exercise selection, with my clients, with you guys, is that practical isn't necessarily the difference between no results and a lot of results, but sometimes it's the difference between short-term results and long-term results. Good results versus great results, especially with beginners. But basically, when you choose exercises, one of the best lenses and perspectives through which you can view the art of exercise selection is, how do I choose something that's practical for me and why? Okay, so let's think about it. If someone doesn't have a particular piece of equipment, they can't use it. But guess what? If you don't have it, you can just buy it. Now, that might sound like a bold statement, right? We don't all have tons of disposable income that we can just dish out on exercise equipment. Maybe it's the basics. You don't have any dumbbells at all, so you can't do 20, 25, 30-pound curls. Okay, you can't do any bench presses with that, any shoulder presses. Or maybe you do have some dumbbells, but you don't have a bench. You don't have a squat rack. You don't have a chin-up bar. Maybe you have a chin-up bar, but no free weights, right? So if you don't have any equipment, you can't use it, but guess what? You can save up some money, whether you're in high school, whether you're in college, whether you're trying to pay off some student debt, maybe you're newlywed, maybe you're retired, right? And you're trying to spend your pensions and your savings very responsibly. Guess what? The home gym is the master race of self-guided exercise programs. So come on in and join the home gym master race. Build your home gym, but the alternative, you can just go to a gym, right? I mean, there's all kinds of different cheap options out there, or more expensive options. Or sometimes if you live on like a school campus, or if you live in a nice apartment complex or condo, you're going to have some gym facilities within your access just because you live at that particular place. So if you have that, take advantage of it. Otherwise, get building your home gym, right? Like a squat rack's not a lot of money. You might be able to get one for $200 or $300, and in pretty good condition, you're going to be able to load that sucker up with 300, 400, 500 pounds and not really have to worry about it, right? Long term, you can get a better squat rack if you want to, but that is plenty of utility. Same thing with a bench press. One of the more expensive things is going to be buying plates, especially 45s or anything. Any amount of plates that's going to allow you to do like powerlifting style training on deadlifts, squats, and bench. It's going to cost you some money, but in the long run, it's going to save you money over gym memberships. And dumbbells as well. I think you should carefully consider how many dumbbells you even need in a home collection. Like I have 20s, 30s, 35s. I'm working on 40s, and I have 5s, 10s, 15s, but I'm probably not going to keep accumulating that. I'm probably going to go to a gym in addition to my home gym when and if I feel like I need to use some dumbbells or just have some fun with them occasionally, right? It's a luxury for me. I'm in a position where I can do that. Not everybody is, but guess what? Dumbbells take up a lot of space, and it's going to be expensive to build your way up to like 100-pound dumbbells or beyond, right? So if you're going to train with dumbbells, probably save that for the gym long term. But yeah, if you pick up 3 or 4 pairs of dumbbells, that's not going to set you back too far. Guess what? If you've got no equipment, you've got no excuses. That is not a reason not to exercise, period. You can do some push-ups. You can do some kneeling push-ups if you can't do push-ups. You can do some wall squats or wall sits or some lunges. Maybe you're flexible and strong enough to do ATG lunges. Just because you have no equipment doesn't mean you have an excuse not to do resistance training. All right, so start somewhere. And long term, with calisthenics, you can build it up with pretty minimal equipment. Chin-up bar, some rings, maybe a little bit of a plate collection to do some weighted calisthenics with, right? Go to a park, go to a calisthenics park if such a thing exists near you, maybe even a gym long term. But yeah, there's some pretty minimalistic ways of training, minimalistic with regards to exercise equipment, where you get a ton out of not a whole lot. And that's something you should consider. More complicated movements do not equal better movements. So just because something looks really flashy, here's a great example. Joel Seedman exercises, right? looks really intricate, very sciencey, very flashy, but these are not very good exercises, so don't do them. Just because something is more complex doesn't mean it's more conducive to strength or skill or size or speed or anything like that, or somehow it's better for your joints. You want an exercise, in my opinion, generally to be only as complicated as necessary as per your goals. So, a powerlifter's technique on bench press may have more layers to it for the purposes of lifting more weight at competition than someone who's just training recreationally like me. I just do the bench. I like picking things up, putting them down, getting a big, strong chest. I'm not too worried about all the ways to maximally get weight on the bar with a super high arch and so on. So my technique is going to be a little bit less complicated for the same movement than a power lifter. That's something you need to consider in your exercise choices. And regardless of what you choose, you need to rationalize what the best ones are for you. And going back to practicality being a huge benefit, part of your rationalization should be, is this a practical exercise to do? Look at your injuries, look at your experience level, look at the space in your home. If you have space for this or for that, you can think about whether it's practical to get some kind of a deadlift platform. Probably is, and a squat rack and things like that. But you got to work within your own limitations, guys. So try and rationalize the exercises that are best for you. And as long as you're getting results, I'm not going to argue with you. That's what counts. Now, we need to understand trade-offs in choosing exercises. When you increase one variable in a program, it comes at the expense of another. So, for example, if you're training 10 sets of bench press per week, maybe it's divided up in 2 days, right? So two times per week, you do 5 sets of bench, total adds up to 10. And you want to make your bench workouts harder, or you want to blow up your bench press. So you say, well, I'll do an extra day of bench press with the same volume. That's 50% more work for your chest, for your shoulders, for your elbows, for the tendons and all those places, right? So 10 sets to 15 is an enormous jump. If we're talking about an equalized rate of exertion, if all those sets are equally hard, right, and they're all at the same rep range, then what you're going to end up with is something that's really hard to recover from. Chances are the 10 sets was more than plenty for you to make progress from. And as a result, by jumping it up 50% more work per week, you're probably going to surpass, and we've talked about this before, your maximal recoverable volume. You're past that minimum effective dose, but now here, by jumping your work up so much, you've probably overshot past your maximal recoverable volume. So when you manipulate one variable in a program, it comes at the expense of another. Now that's not necessarily directly related to exercise selection, but in a sense it is. Reason is that when you choose an exercise, you can say, it's better because of this. It's better because it's less stable, so I don't need as much weight. Well, it's going to come at the expense of maybe a Larson press, you're not using leg drive. Is that a downside? I don't know. You tell me. But it's a difference. Doing something differently, it just means that you have to make changes, and those changes aren't free. Everything you do has a cost. Everything has pros, everything has cons. And that's how I want you guys to think. Yes, it's true that a high bar back squat or low bar back squat, is a different experience than a Smith machine or a hack squat. But that doesn't mean a Smith machine or a hack squat are bad exercises. In fact, I think they're fantastic accessories. They're good ways to get strong, accumulate size for your quads. But just because, lifting a free weight is cool, and maybe it challenges your mobility differently, your balance, maybe some core work and stabilizers differently, doesn't mean it's inherently better for someone who's more beat up and has had surgeries or very serious injuries. It might be better just to get them doing a hack squat or some kind of Smith machine variation if that feels better for them at that particular moment in time. So just because something is better because of X, doesn't mean it's better when you take a look at Y. One variable going up means another one's got to come down, right? So better isn't always better. You need to really think about it. Same thing with biasing specific muscles. You can bias your quads more with different quad variations, or squat variations rather, like a front squat. With the deadlift, you can bias the posterior chain more, like with the stiff leg deadlift. But just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. You should think about why it is that you're making these changes. Do you feel that you're getting beat up from the competition style lifts? Perhaps you need less volume. Perhaps you need to spend more time warming up. Perhaps you need to address technique. Try to avoid in your program, when you're trying to make exercise selection decisions, try and avoid any knee-jerk reactions, emotional reactions, or you see one person who you follow, who you really respect on YouTube or Instagram, you see them make that change, and you go, well, I'm going to make that change. And maybe in your head you think, well, I had this one issue last week with conventional deadlifts. Maybe this is a sign I need to change. You know what? I think it'd be better just to address your technique and your warm-ups and your volume and your recovery before you go ahead and swap an exercise to bias more muscles. Regardless of what's going on in your program, you got to think it through first. So if you're going to bias specific muscles, do it with intent. And again, consider the trade-offs. What does biasing something more mean? It means you're biasing something else less. So you need to think about what the consequences are going to be for that decision. More freedom means less stability and probably therefore less weight. So there's a lot of good exercises out there where the more challenging variation involves instability, whether that's a one-arm push-up or a Larson press versus a bench press. Maybe that's a front squat done with your heels elevated, right? Using the leverages to bias your quads, getting less weight. More freedom of movement might also look like dumbbell bench press versus a flat barbell bench press, right? That freedom of movement means it's harder to stabilize, which means you can't get as much weight. Just because you can't get as much weight and you have more freedom doesn't necessarily mean it's an inherently better motion. If you find it's better on your shoulders at a particular moment in time, it could be that you could get all that same benefit just from refining your flat bench barbell bench technique, right? Your competition style bench technique, refine it. And then maybe your shoulders to feel better. Maybe you need to start doing some overhead press, warming up better, using less weight. You need to consider these things before you, again, make an emotional knee-jerk reaction and say, no. So-and-so said the dumbbell bench is better. Look, I got it. It's a great exercise. Doesn't mean you have to incorporate it. A good example is Johnny Candido, very strong. I think he got close to a 405 bench before he kind of gave up on his bench press ambitions. And that's fine. That's an enormous bench press. He's got a massive chest. He's now focusing more on the dumbbells, and from what I can tell, his shoulders feel better. That's a good decision for him. But just because he's a high-level power lifter and he made that decision doesn't mean you need to make that same course of action. You can do just fine for a long time with the competition-style lifts if you manage them properly. All right, so understand the trade-offs in your programming decisions. I think barbells are great. I think dumbbells are great. I think machines are great. I think calisthenics and weighted calisthenics are fantastic. You need to think about what's going to work for you and why. And if something's not working for you currently, you need to really honestly assess why that is, and maybe even ask people for advice on how you can fix a movement before you swap a movement. That would be wise. So that way you can be more consistent. Okay, now be on the hunt for results and embrace the skill/learning curve. So what do I mean about being on the hunt for results? Well, I want you guys to take a look at strong dudes throughout history, natural bodybuilders, power lifters. You could even take a look at people here on YouTube like Bald Omni-Man, Alpha Destiny, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, strong, big naturals, and look at what kinds of movements they do. So what lifts are the buff guys doing? They might be doing variations of bench press, variations of overhead press, deadlifts, back squats, front squats, curls, weighted pull-ups, weighted dips, so on, right? There's very common exercises with slight variations where you'll see these different people training, and that's good evidence that these are good movements, right? The proof is in the pudding, so the fact that these gentlemen have got great results from it over the years speaks to the usefulness of those movements. However, it does not mean that there's some sort of exclusive benefit to any one particular exercise or variation. So take a look at what the strongest dudes are doing, and if they have anything to say about why they like that movement, listen for why it is. But again, going back to arguing from authority, we're just dudes hanging out at the end of the day, even if we have credentials, and we're just picking things up and putting them down. So don't overthink how qualified someone is to the point where you're going to deny reality if you get better results from a different exercise. Compare you to you. So if you go from doing high bar squats mostly to doing front squats mostly, and you notice a positive difference, compare you to yourself. Look at the results of that. See what happens. Does your back feel better? Does your mobility feel better? Are you happy with the quad hypertrophy if this is months and months later? You got to compare you to yourself. Now take a look at the trendy exercises. Do people actually stick to them long term? Chances are probably not, because they're trash. Try it for yourself. I can't just necessarily say that, hey, you know what, this is the best exercise for you, this is the best one for you, or that this is the best one for all of you in my audience, or, here's how I like to train, that's why you should train that way. No, you know what, you're going to have to try some things out for yourself, and from that experience, make some decisions about what excellent movements are and why. All right, last point, embrace the skill/learning curve. Guys, it's going to take probably 1 to 2 months just to get competent at a technique, to really refine it. Okay, the first couple of weeks, you're barely going to push for gains. Okay, you just need to get used to not being wobbly and shaky and doing cheat reps. You need to get good at what you're doing it a few times. And then over the course of 1 to 2 months, you're going to really refine that efficiency if you're trying to. So if you're going to swap movements in a program, try not to do it more than 2 or 3 times in a year. That's my personal opinion. That's not scientific by any means. But guys, you need to spend time just refining your technique. So maybe in the course of 1 year, don't do every single type of squat, plat squats and front squats and back squats, low bar, high bar, hack squat, Smith machine, leg press. You don't need to do all of these in the course of 1 year. You could train 3 or 4 of them in the course of 1 year and swap some of them out the next year, right? Gradually, proving to yourself that you get results from each one and thinking about why you like one better than another. One might be more beneficial for this goal or that goal, but don't be in a hurry to swap things out. You need time just for technique alone, okay? And push past your novelty fear. Never done front squats before? Looks awkward, looks like you're gonna choke yourself? Guess what? It's not that bad. You just need to practice with a lightweight. You need to practice your novel exercises with a lightweight, humble yourself, get used to the technique again, and just because something looks kind of scary, whether that's a paused bench or a front squat or a paused deadlift, you're worried about your back, give it a try with a lightweight, focus on the technique, and be honest. All right, now you need to make sure that you're doing your homework. So if you can do some research right here on the platform, not necessarily scientific studies, right? Do some research on what the proper techniques are, some good resources you guys can look at. Bald Omni-Man, Sheath Art Training, Alexander Bromley. Those are just a few good ones. There's plenty more than that. You can refer to my channel. I don't have a ton of videos posted right now, but long term, I think I'll consider myself a pretty good resource here on the platform. But do some research on how to competently perform any given movement, right? Especially the compounds. Focus on your warm-ups. You need to get warmed up properly before movement. Don't just jump into it. And seek help when you have issues, whether that's hiring a coach like me, or just leaving a comment somewhere, or sending someone a message here and there, as long as you're not harassing them and messaging them every day. Seek some help. And as a good general rule of thumb, no 1 rep maxes. In general, it's a pretty good rule. Okay, you don't need to do heavy singles really ever. You can, as programming in for a test week, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Don't be in a hurry to do heavy singles. Doing really, really heavy near maximal threshold work, that's going to beat up your joints. So you need to use that stuff sparingly, but particularly for variations, don't do a 1 rep max to assess how strong you are and then try and work backwards and say, this is my 1 rep max, so this must be an appropriate weight for me to do a set of 5 with. Just experiment and then get to that point where it feels heavy, but you can still do a quality set with it. And it doesn't have to be sets of 5. I just mean that in general, no 1 rep maxes until you've actually earned it. Stick the exercise out for a few months, and then you can start testing your strength, all right? You don't even need to do it at the beginning necessarily. All right, now, but the key takeaways are this. You need to have movements that match the movement patterns. You need to have isolations that match the muscles that benefit from isolation, right? Your smaller muscle groups. You need to do these things consistently. You need to accumulate tonnage over time. You need to think about practicality, because it's a huge benefit. It's not 100% necessary to do the most practical thing, and it's very subjective, right? Whether that's balance or budget or space or experience, but thinking about what's practical for you and why is going to benefit you greatly long term. Understand what trade-offs are in a program in general, but also more specifically in exercise variations. Just because something does this with leverages doesn't mean that you can just ignore the fact that it drops something else. Be on the hunt for results, your results as proof, as a testimonial to the effectiveness of a movement, and also look at what other people are doing too. And then finally, embrace the skill/learning curve, because you've heard the saying before, Rome wasn't built in a day. You need to be patient, regardless of whether or not you have the best exercise variations or not. You got to be patient. This stuff takes time. Anyways, that's all I've got for you guys. Take care. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.